I'm gonna mix, and I like to use whenever I'm balayaging. Let me spotlight my video here. I want to make sure you guys can all see this pretty well too. So let me hold on.
Miss Sabrina, I'm in the car, but I want to see this. I don't want to miss it. I'm going to Sally's right now.
Okay, no worries. All right. So what I have here is my bowl and tint brush, and I like the Framar brushes because they are nice and feathered at the end, so they give a nice blend on your balayage, okay? And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna mix some lightener, and I'm using whatever I have here at the house. I'm not using Blonde Me, but I'm using whatever I have here. And I am going to create a 20. I didn't realize I was out of 20 here at the house. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mix a little bit of water to dilute my 40 down and make it not as strong. Okay, so I'm just gonna pour some water into my bleach, and I probably would dilute it with about, maybe I would say equivalent to, depending on how much bleach you're mixing, maybe like a tablespoon at a time.
Miss Sabrina?
Yes.
I have a question. So I don't know. I'm only bringing this up because, like, what if you like to run out of developer and you only have like a smaller developer and you mix it like a 20 and a 10 or something? Does it change the volume of
if you mix a 20 and a 10, it's going to give you a 15.
Right. So if you like make something lower, it goes down 5, and you go up 1, does it go up 5 kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, so that happens when I'm at the salon and I'm at a developer, I will do that. If I need to drop my developer down and I'm using a stronger developer, so I'll mix some water in it just to dilute it a little bit so it's not as strong. Or it's better to start higher and work your way down, because you can't go higher, right? If you're already lower. You can't make the developer stronger if you don't start with a strong developer already. So just want to make sure that I get my consistency how I like it. And I'm mixing a bigger batch right here because I'm going to try and work pretty quick, and I don't want to have to go back and mix again. With the client, I wouldn't do this. A mannequin, I really don't care too much, right? It's kind of like I'm just playing here. I know that I can get away with doing certain things on a mannequin versus a client. And I can play around with it versus on a client, you don't want to mess around because they're an actual paying client. It's a person. They have the hair on their head. You don't want to really do too much craziness. So I'm going to let this sit for a minute while it oxidizes. Just a second. It's going to start to firm up some. If you guys have any questions, please just stop me at any point, and then I can answer whatever questions you have. Okay. So I have my foil here. I have my duckbill clips. I have my lightener that I've mixed here. And this was the highlight touch-up that we did the other day in the back. Hold on, let me silence my phone. Okay. So this was the highlight that we did the other day in the back, right? Where we went off and then back on. So I don't really want to mess too much with the root area. I don't want to go into the root, but I do want to go into the ends and lighten the ends. So what I would do for you guys, this is just kind of an easy way. I like to work in the back. I'll work in more of like 2 sections. And then as I work my way up to the back of the head and the back of the crown area, I'll incorporate it into 1 section. Okay, so I'll start off with 2 sections here, and I'll show you what that looks like. So I'll start off with 2 sections, and as you see, it's already pre-lightened here in the bottom area because we already did that highlight down here. But I like to take diagonal back subsections because anytime you take a diagonal section in the back, or just in general, when you are doing any type of highlighting or balayaging, it's going to make it to where it falls more naturally versus straight. So I took a diagonal back this way and a diagonal back that way, okay? Both sides. So I kind of have like this V pattern naturally going on. And I want to ask my client, you're going to consult and ask your client how low they want their balayage to be or how high they want it to be, right? And that's going to depend. I'm just going to show you some basic techniques that you can use here. And what I want to do is I want to do more of a chunky. This mannequin has a lot of hair. So I want to do more of a chunkier technique. And down here, I really don't want to focus too much on blending technique. I mean, I am going to do some blending technique, but I'm going to start at the bottom here. I'm going to start at the bottom here. Just like this, maybe the last like 4 inches. And then I will feather my way. Up. So you can start applying horizontally with the brush, but then what you want to do is ultimately go in at an angle, okay? And all I do is just fold the sides just like this and fold the end up. That's it. So I kind of get this long foil here, just like that. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to chunk it out because I want a lot of her hair to be blonde down here. So I want it to be chunky. And she has a lot of hair. So I can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to apply it to the last 4 inches of her hair. And I want to make sure that the saturation is good. I'm going to go back. And then I'll do kind of like this little flicking motion. Just to blend it so we don't get a harsh line. I don't want a harsh line. And when you're balayaging, you don't want to think too much. You don't want to overthink. Think about it, but don't, plan it out, but don't stress yourself over the pattern too much, right? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to take another diagonal back. And because this section right here is already pretty blonde. I'm gonna leave that out. I'm gonna focus on the area that's not blonde. And I'm gonna go in, and now I'll do a medium. Now I'll go in with more of a medium. And do you see how thick these subsections are? They're pretty thick.
If our doll head is already bleached or highlighted, do we have to do that? Or...
I wouldn't recommend doing this on a mannequin that is not already pre-bleached. Because you're not gonna get the same effect, right?
Yeah. Do you have to like do the partings for like the highlight or whatever on there? Because you said you have bleached hair already on your doll head, so you kind of left that part out.
Yeah, I'm kind of just leaving that part out.
So if we don't have the bleach part, we don't have to leave it out.
Yeah, so if you don't have the bleach part, then I would go over it. Because you're gonna want to lighten that area.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna fold this section here and fold this up. So I just kind of get this long tube here.
So you're doing big sections in V?
Yeah, I'm doing big sections in a diagonal back. I'm working in two sections right here. I parted it in one section here in the back, and then I'm just doing diagonal backs. And then I went from a chunky, now I'm gonna go into more of a medium. But I'm working with a lot of hair. And her hair texture is not fine, but it's not super coarse either. It's more of a medium in between texture, which allows for good saturation. If she had really, really coarse hair, I would be taking a lot thinner subsections to accommodate for that.
So is there a reason why you went from chunky to medium?
Yeah, so I want to confuse the pattern. I don't want it to be chunky, chunky, chunky. As I get higher up to the head, it's gonna start chunky and it's gonna go to fine.
Good question. Does it matter what mannequin we use, like the hair color that the mannequin already has?
No, it doesn't matter. You can use the darker hair mannequin. You can use a lighter hair mannequin. That's up to you.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't want to spend too much time in the back here, but I have some blondes in here that I have to accommodate for. Like I have some blonde pieces. So what I want to do is I want to leave those out. I'm going to go around those and kind of pick those out. Okay. Depending on how blonde you want your mannequin to be, I'll show you a technique that you can do. So now I'm in the back of the crown still. So after this, I'm gonna stay either in a medium or a fine, but right now I'm gonna do a chunky right here underneath. And I don't wanna go too high on this. I'm gonna start midway, mid shaft. And you have to remember, in the salon, time is money. We don't have time to do a 3-hour. When we first started doing balayage 10 years ago, we were going in, picking out, teasing the hair like crazy, right? Doing all kinds of techniques. But now we found that it's pretty much just like a highlight. There's faster ways you can do it in the salon and get the same result. So I'm gonna leave the last few inches here. Working to now this side here. I'm gonna leave this blonde section out and I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna skip this here because that's where she has a blonde piece right in here. So I don't need to take that piece out. And the most important part when you're balayaging anyways is gonna be around their face. You wanna make sure that when you go around the face, you're very tedious about that. And I'm very lightly. You have to be very light-handed with this. You can't be too heavy-handed when you do this. Okay, so now I have this top section here, right, on the top of the head. Now what I want to do is I want to incorporate this into one section and bring it back. So I'm going to bring this whole section here because now I'm getting to the top of the back of the crown and I want I'm past the crest area where it's the widest area. So now I'm going to accommodate for that. And I have some blondes here, so I'm gonna leave that out. But now what I'm gonna do is bring everything to a point here. And I'm gonna go more into a fine, not too fine. It's gonna be more medium actually. It's gonna be more medium and I'm gonna show you a technique that I use to create a little bit more blonde in this back crown area. So I'm gonna put the foil here. As I move up to the top of the head, I will get closer to the root area. Right now, I'm not there yet, but I'm going to, as I work my way up, I will get closer. Okay, so now you see this first foil here that I just highlighted? I'm gonna take the hair that I weaved out underneath it. This hair underneath it you see how I weaved it out? I'm gonna go right behind it and weave a whole nother piece again. But the trick is, I just wanna tip out the ends. I just want the ends to be a little bit blonder. So it's gonna have a staggered effect. And you can create your W's or your V's here, right, for blending. But I want these ends tipped out. So now if I pull this down, do you see how one's higher than the other? Do you guys see that? So you want to stagger these, huh? So this one is here and the one underneath it is gonna be about here. So I got a good 2 inches off. Now I wanna create dimensions, so I'm gonna leave a little bit out. And then my next section, I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm doing a 1-to-1 ratio back here. Here I go again. So I'm gonna grab a subsection, bring everything to a point here from the crown. And at this point, I'm gonna do a medium. I'm not quite at the top just yet, still at the back of the crown. And you don't wanna, and now that I'm getting higher, I'm gonna go higher to the head, right? And you wanna ask your client if they want some dimension. Do they want dimension? Do they not? They want dimension at this point. If they want dimension, then you're gonna leave pieces like I did out, base pieces, so that they have the dimension there. If they don't want that, then you're gonna have to tip out all of their ends. All their ends will have to be lightened. Okay, so here's my first section. I'm gonna go right underneath it, right? Whatever I weaved out. And I'm gonna go right behind it. And I'm gonna weave another piece, but this one's gonna be lower. Right? So that one, I see it's higher. I want the one right underneath it. Right underneath it, I want it to be lower. Guys, I do this all the time in the salon. This is just every weekend, there's somebody coming in wanting a balayage. And there's just faster ways we can do it now. We don't have to spend 100 years teasing. We can get the same looks that we want, the same results in a quicker way where we don't have to spend 3 to 4 hours balayaging somebody. The main area you really want to focus on is going to be around their face. Okay? Now, I'm gonna leave this piece because now this is considered the top, right? The back of the crown here still, but it's still considered the top, so I don't wanna mess with that just yet. I'm gonna go around and I'm gonna focus on this area and I'll incorporate that back section at some point. Okay, so now this is a very important part, is around their face. So I want you to pay attention because this is gonna be a big deal here. So I'm not gonna focus on the sides just yet. So what I wanna do is take the bang out and I wanna create that money piece that everybody wants, right? Let me take that clip down. And what I want to do is I'm going to break it up into 2 sections here. One side and the other side. Now, ask your client how solid they want their money piece. Ask them how big they want it, how thick they want it. If they want it to, I'm going to show you something a little bit more natural, not too thick and heavy. But you're gonna ask them what they want. Now I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna baby light this area right here. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna baby light that. Okay? And this one is at the hairline. This one's at the hairline, so I'm gonna go all the way down to the root area right here. I'm gonna go all the way to the root. I'm gonna do the same thing to this side. Go in. I'm gonna create my baby light. A little bit better, hold on. I recommend a pin tip for this. I don't know where my pin tip went, but I hope it's happy because it's not with me. That's for sure. Okay. So I'm gonna go in at the root. Make sure your saturation's good, because if it's not, guess what? You're gonna have holidays with spots. So make sure it's nice and good. Okay, so now I have 2 foils at the root. I'm gonna put these up and I'm gonna go in, I'll pull these together here. I'm gonna go in, do you see where I weaved it all out here? I'm gonna use these pieces here and I'm gonna tip these ends out right underneath it. Just like this, but I don't wanna go all the way to the root area. I'm gonna go off a good 1.5 inches.
So would you place that on their face area like that?
Yep, exactly. And mind you, her whole body's right here, right? So when I do this, I would be standing to the side doing this, not right on top of them. But yes, you're gonna do it right in their face.
Miss Sabrina, I have a question. So I use the Blonde Me, and I noticed that it swells a lot. I've tried different ratios. Do you have any tips for that?
What volume are you using?
I usually use 20.
Yeah. Well, I would account for the swelling. I don't usually apply, when I'm doing Blonde Me, I don't go too heavy on the application, too much in the line area. I am a little bit more sparse in that area when I'm applying Blonde Me because it does swell. So if you pack on too much product right here, you'll get a harsh line. So try and be heavier on the end when you're applying the Blonde Me, but as you go up to this root area, make sure it's just very sparse. It's not too heavy. Try that.
Thank you.
Okay, so you guys see how I left a couple, like 1.5 inches, 2 inches out here? That's what you want to tip out these ends here. So it's gonna break it up a little bit. Now, depending on how blonde they want their bang area, you're gonna go in and do the same thing. So I'm gonna go in right behind because right now I notice that most of my clients do want a little bit of a heavier bang. So I'm gonna do the same thing in this bang area. Gonna go in and I'm gonna do a baby light here. just like this. So I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna baby light the first one, all the way down to the root. Right, these tight little packets. Just like that. And it really depends on how heavy your client wants this bang area. If they want it pretty heavy, then I would be doing this 3 to 4 times depending on how heavy they want it. Now I'm going to grab these pieces that I weaved out here in the bang area. Just like this, these are the pieces that we weaved out. And I'm gonna go right behind it and I'm just gonna tip out these ends, okay? And then I'll go up and I will blend because I want around her face to be blonde. I want it to have that lighter look. Here. Okay, so now her bang is gonna be nice and blonde, right? I've created that blonde effect. Here. I wanna go to her sides now and work around her face to create lighter effects around the face, like area, right in here. So what I'm gonna do is frame that area. I'm gonna grab a set. Do you see how, and most people naturally, this is a mannequin head, so keep in mind that this is a mannequin head, but most people don't have this much hair in this small of a subsection right here around their face, right? It's pretty sparse. But they implanted on this mannequin really heavy. It's really heavy here. The density is really high. Most people, their density is not that heavy. So I'm gonna weave out, because she has heavy density right here and I want it to be pretty blonde, I'm gonna weave it out pretty heavily, okay? I'm gonna go in, it's gonna be fine, but take a really thin subsection around the face area because you have to accommodate for that density. So now I'm gonna go, this is how I'm gonna apply the foil. This is how I would do it on a client too. Okay, so I would follow along their hairline, bringing this whole subsection forward. And I wanna go pretty close to her root area. I'll probably leave an inch or so out. Let me show you what I'm doing here. So do you see how vertical my brush is here? I'm not going in horizontally because I don't want to create a harsh line in the root area, but I definitely am not going all the way to her scalp. I'm leaving about 1/2 inch out. So I'm gonna get this up and clipped away. Now, if your client doesn't want underneath to be so blonde, like around her face, then maybe you might leave this part that you weaved out. So she has some density, or she has some dimension, but I want it to be pretty light around her face. So I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna weave right behind it, the same technique that we used on the back. I'm gonna use it here in the front, and I'm gonna weave right behind it, this section, just to create a little bit more of a lighter effect. And I'm not gonna do the same thing. I'm actually gonna apply about 2 inches down because I want this to be staggered. I don't want it to be right on top of each other. So I'm gonna start lower because I just wanna tip out the ends. And I would encourage you guys, if you guys are really into doing like balayage, or you guys want to get into this, I would say that, practice on people, practice different techniques, because you're going to find what works for you. But do you see how I left enough out behind it? So it's not going to lay right on top of each other. It's going to be staggered. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll work my way in diagonal backs all the way back here. So I'm gonna do diagonal backs all the way up, just like that. Okay. And whenever you work in a diagonal back, especially around the face, it's gonna create a blend, a natural blend. And what I want to do is pull a medium highlight. And I don't want to go all the way to the root area. I'm going to leave a good 1.5 inches to 2 inches out here. And I'm going to start on the ends. And I want to create higher to lower effects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a little bit higher around her face area in here, and I'm going to work my way down. So it's going to have a natural blend to it. And I want to just lightly flick my way up. I'm being very light-handed with that. I don't want any harsh lines. If you do, for whatever reason, create a harsh line, you don't freak out. If you create a harsh line, we can everything could be toned out, okay? So we can tone it back. I just sandwiched these two together because that one's going to be a little bit easier to be sandwiched. I'm going to work my way up. As I get higher, I will go finer with the highlight. Lower, I'm going to be a little bit thicker and chunkier. Okay, So as I work my way up the head, I will go into a finer highlight. Because it gives it a little bit more. And I don't want to go, do you see what I don't want to do is I don't want to have all my foils all be the same length. That's going to create a harsh line. So as you move up the head, as you're moving up, as you're balayaging, you should go higher and higher, closer to the root. Start lower, like down here, you're going to go off the end a lot, you're going to go off probably 3-4 inches. As you move your way up, do you see how I'm staggering this? So the one underneath it, I want to go maybe like an inch higher than that. Okay? So make sure that's going to be key when you're blending. Have you guys ever seen those pictures of those stylists who let people leave the salon and they have like those harsh lines and the balayage just looks terrible. It's not blended. A lot of times what they're doing is they're not staggering their foils or their pattern. And they're not changing up their pattern. They're just doing the one pattern throughout the whole head sometimes. So you guys want to make sure when you're doing this, you're going to stagger it. So I'm going to create different variations here with the balayage. And I want to make sure I get good saturation, right? Okay. Now that I'm moving up, I'm getting finer and finer. There. Anybody have any questions? What's the hardest thing you guys find when you're balayaging? What's the biggest issue? Have we even tried balayaging at this point? Or no? Have none of us ever tried it?
I have a problem with toning, just different things like I don't know what to tone with. I usually use EQ shades, but I still have sometimes a difficult time to know like what formula I should use.
What you should be using on that client. Well, the rule of thumb is anytime you see any gold, you want to use violet, right? A violet base. And then you want to make sure you tone for the level that it's at. Those are the two biggest things. Look at what underlying pigment it pulls after you wash it out. Look at it and determine, what is the underlying pigment? Is it copper? Is it gold? Is it what is it? Because if it's copper, then you need to use something that's more blue based. But if it is copper, that means that what's happening is you probably didn't get it light enough, and anytime you have to use a blue base, you're gonna have to go darker with the toner. So keep that in mind. But if you're doing blonde, if you get them to a pale yellow, at that point, okay, I can go in. At that point, you're like, okay, I can go in with a violet because I've got them a little bit light. I got them light enough to where it's going to be okay. But I like what I got at the beauty supply, which are my go-tos, is 10T, which is a platinum. I get 9P. 9P is a good one, and I mix 9P with 9B. So I mix a P and a V together, and it's usually 9, because I like to drop it down just a little bit. That is like a really, really good one. 7 in is a good root shade for somebody like this level here. It's say like I got it too high and I don't want her that high. A 6 in or a 7 in on somebody this light looks really, really pretty for a root shade. And then I got 10 in just for more of a neutral. If I don't want them to be too ashy looking, then I get the neutral. But those are for the shop, guys. That's not for her, because she's not that special. I'm sorry. So she doesn't get that treatment to tone out. But if you guys want, I can bring this mannequin to our class and I can tone there. That way you guys can see some toning. Okay, so I've weaved out around her face. Everything that I did on the other side, I'm gonna do on this side as well. Okay, no different. Same. I want it to be symmetrical, so whatever you do on one side of the head, you need to do on the other, because if not, then it's not gonna match. So this is,
sorry. So you're taking the sides of the head diagonal as well?
yes, this is gonna be, I'm following her hairline here.
Okay, so you do that all throughout to the back of the side of the head then?
Yeah, I will. I'm gonna weave out right behind this one. I'm gonna go right behind it, because I do want a little bit of dimension around her face. I do want a little bit of her natural around her face, her base color, but I do want it to look blonde. I do want it to look lighter. And this one, I'm not gonna back it up right behind it, because this one I went to the root. So this one, I wanna go off the root a little bit. So I know that when I apply, I'm not gonna go all the way to the root area. I'm gonna leave it off the root a couple of inches here. But I do wanna get these ends lighter, because I do want it to be lighter around her face.
Jason.
So do you see how it's staggered? It's not backed up right behind each other. And I'm gonna follow this, whatever I did on this side, I wanna do on the other side as well. So I'm gonna take my diagonal back subsections here. I'm gonna take my diagonal back, and I'm gonna go in and I'm going to weave around her face. And I'm gonna start lower.
You guys
and
stop.
Work my way up. So whatever I did to one side, I'm just gonna do to the other. Okay. taking diagonal back, subpartings. And I don't want it too chunky around her face, so that's why I'm doing a blend between a medium to fine highlight here, because I don't want it super chunky around her face. And remember, you want to go higher each time and stagger it. So I'm going to go a little bit higher, and then I'll work my way down to create this kind of effect here, a diagonal back application. As you get closer to the top of the head, you can get closer to the root area, but the further down you are, with the exception of her face framing, we're gonna be lower. We're gonna start lower and we're gonna work our way up and stagger these foils. So do you see how low this one was here? It's gonna go higher and higher, closer to the root area. And then you end up with this little triangle right here, right? Because we had this boxed out section. So you end up with this triangle here. I like to leave that dark, just kind of go, and it gives it dimension. So I would just leave it. Okay, so now we have her mohawk section here, right? We have the top of her head. Now this is very important area, especially behind the bang, okay? We did a lot of heavy foiling in her bang area. In order for her bang to pop and you to see that, you need to leave some hair behind it out, okay? So what I'm gonna do right now is leave a good enough chunk here, a good inch out, that is, or maybe even a little bit more, maybe like 1.25 inches out. That way, this is gonna lay over her blonde area, because you need to have a darker piece that backs right behind your blonde to make the blonde area around your face pop, okay? So make sure that when you guys are doing this, you leave a good enough section behind the bang area that you really lighten. Leave that a darker area, a base. Make sure her base is out. Okay, so now that I left her base out, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna take another subsection here, and I'll highlight that, I'll baby light it actually. So I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna baby light right around the top here. And this doesn't need to be all the way to the root area. This could be off 1/2 inch. You don't want to go all the way down to the root. Leave it off a little bit. And I'm gonna do whatever I do to one side, I'm gonna do to the other. Okay. So I'm gonna go in right behind. Okay, see that? I'm gonna go in right behind and I'm gonna baby light right behind what the next, right next to the other one here. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so now that I have did a baby light, I want to go right underneath it to the area that I weaved out. And I want to tip out those ends by weaving right underneath it. So this is a common technique that you're going to see me do. Whenever I do a baby light, I like to back it up and weave out little pieces behind it, right underneath it, and I'll tip out those ends. So I'm gonna go down about 1.5 to 2 inches right behind my baby light area just to make that a little bit lighter. And this is still gonna look natural. It's still, because we have a lot of base that's still out, so it's still gonna be a natural looking balayage. It's not gonna be too blonde or too heavy looking because we are leaving a lot of her base out. Okay, so this is gonna be a 1-to-1. I'm gonna leave a little bit of her base now, not as big as I did behind the bang area, but now I'm gonna go and I'm gonna follow this pattern all the way up along the head. Here. Okay, so I'm gonna go in and take my subsection out and I'm gonna do a baby light. And then what I'll do is I'll go right behind that baby light and I'll back it up with tipping out those ends. So just like, you'll see it just like this. Let me spin her around a little bit. So just like that, I'm in a baby lighter. And this will be higher on her root. Now, if your client wants all of her ends blonde, then I would go in between, whatever's left out, I would go in between and I would balayage. I would hand paint. I wouldn't put them in foils. I would just go behind them and hand paint those out. Okay, so now I'm gonna go right behind this baby lighted area here and I'm gonna weave out another section and I'm gonna make these ends right behind that baby light a little bit lighter. But I'm gonna go 1.5 to 2 inches off the root. You guys, this is such a quick way to balayage and get your clients a natural balayage look without having to spend 3 to 4 hours teasing their hair, picking their hair out, thinking about, it's easy. It's a thoughtless process. The back, you go chunkier to medium, do 2 sections, the sides, diagonal back, do her money piece, leave the piece behind it out, and baby light the top. And when you baby light the top, go right behind it and back it up and tip those ends out. Okay, and I made a ton of bleach and I'm almost out. So I made almost just enough for a full head. Now I baby lighted that section, so I want to go right behind it